So let's talk about the guy named Mark Shepard. So guess where he's from? Wisconsin. And guess what he's trying to grow? Hazelnuts. But here's the problem. He can't find any plants that he can grow in his area. He calls the West Coast. He calls the East Coast. He calls up north. He calls down south. He calls all over the country. And he can't find anybody that sells hazelnuts that can grow in his area. They say it's too hot there. They say it gets too cold there. He lives in some kind of valley or some geographical land near some geographical landform that makes it really, really warm in the summer, like triple digits in the summer, and it gets below 0 in the winter. Very kind of extreme weather conditions. So here's what he wanted. He wants cold hardy plants because it gets below 0, and he wants them to flower very, very early. Why would he want plants to flower really, really early? What happens when a plant flowers? What can it do? It can produce seeds. And what is a seed on a hazelnut tree? Hazelnuts. So it's like a pecan tree. So we want to eat the pecans, and it has to produce flowers to produce pecans. So we want it to produce flowers as fast as we can. And so he wants cold hardy, which means it can withstand cold temperatures. So cold hardy here would be it can withstand like temperatures in the 20s. Cold hardy there means it needs to withstand temperatures down below 0. So cold hardy can change what that means depending on where you live. But here's the problem. Problem number 1, there were no trees for sale or no seeds for sale that would help him do this. Problem number 2, when you're making an orchard, you generally don't put the trees 1 foot apart. Why? Yeah, because they're, what's that word? It starts with the key, C. They are
combined.
Oh, so close. Competing. They're competing for what? What kind of things they're going to compete for? Sunlight, water, nutrients. They're competing for a bunch of stuff. So they're going to produce way, way, way less per tree. So people, when they plant hazelnuts tree, they plant them something like 30 feet apart. Now think about that. You plant a hazelnut. Think about a pecan, something that size. How long do you think it's going to take for that hazelnut when you plant it in the ground in perfect conditions to grow 15 feet each way, 30 feet? How long do you think it'll take? A year? 2? I believe, if I remember correctly, a couple of decades. It may take 2 to 3 decades for it to maximize its growth. Do you think he's going to want to sit there on his farm waiting for 20 to 30 years for that plant to be at maximum growth? No. What if he plants them 30 feet apart and some of them die? Now he's got an empty space that's not even growing to produce food, a decade or 2 later. So those are his 2 problems. How do you think he could solve that? So this is what he does. His solution. He plants thousands of trees. Let me go back. I don't want y'all to see that. He plants thousands of trees. Thousands and thousands and thousands. And I say seed. I think they're actually seeds. He actually planted hazelnuts, I think. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll put them in like fertilizer or like potting soil in like a barrel. And as they grow, the next year he'll pull them out as little seedlings, and then he'll plant those. But he plants thousands and thousands and thousands of them. So he plants thousands of them. What do you think is going to happen that first winter? He plants them in spring. What do you think is going to happen that first winter? How many of them are going to die? What percentage? I mean, I'm guessing, I don't know, but I'm guessing somewhere like 90, 95, 98% of them are going to die. But if he has planted thousands and thousands and thousands of them, even if it's 95% of them die, he's still got 5% of thousands and thousands and thousands, which is really, really beneficial. Also, what he's going to do, because he knows this is going to happen, what he does is he plants them 1, 2, 3 feet apart. Now, how far do they need to be eventually? Yeah, something like 20, 30 feet apart to be maxed out. So what he does is he plants them really, really close together so that when a lot of them die, hopefully they'll be spread out enough to where they need to be. Does that make sense to y'all? Do y'all understand? And so the first year, dun, 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 what happened? They died. Most of them died. But 100% of the ones that were left behind, almost 100%, what quality do they have? What quality do they have that's different than the rest? Yeah. They're what? They are cold hardy. Check. Goal number 1, success. They're cold hardy. Now, does he have early flowering or early producing trees? Nope. How does he select for that? So he's got them, and there's there's one here. 20 feet later, there's another one. 2 feet later, they're all kind of spread out throughout his orchard. Looks like somebody with a bad haircut. They're all spread out everywhere, not any kind of rhyme or reason. Um, how does he? Select? How does he use selective breeding to? Or how could he use his understanding of science to get plants that are early flowering? I'll tell you, 2 or 3 years later, he goes out there with some loppers, which are like scissors for trees, and he goes out there, and if there's no flowers on that tree when there should be flowers, he chops them down at the ground, and it falls over. So he's cutting down a lot of his trees. So let's just say he started with 5,000 or 6,000 trees. Now he's down to a very low number, very small. He has to walk a good bit of distance in between. But now he has what? He has cold hardy and early flowering. When they finally produce, I'm not saying when they're max out production. Let's say 2 to 3 to 4 years later, 5 years later. What kind of seeds is he producing? He's producing seeds that if you plant them, there should be a pretty high chance of them having cold hardy genetics and early flowering genetics. So instead of having to buy thousands and thousands and thousands more and do this again, he can wait for the first couple crops, not eat any of them. He can take those seeds, plant them in the ground, and now instead of 95% dying that winter, maybe only 50% die. And he keeps on doing that, and eventually he gets a pretty high rate of germination of plants that live. And so now I think he did this in the 70s, I believe, maybe early 80s. Now he has genetics for his area of Wisconsin where he can sell hazelnuts, and he does. He sells hazelnuts to people who want to eat them. He sells hazelnuts to people who want to grow them. And he has genetics on his farm, which that's a picture of a hazelnut right there. He has genetics on his farm that are cold hardy, and they fruit early, which is really good. If you're in the farming business, you don't want to have to wait 10 years when you can wait 3 years. If I said I will give you $100, if you give me $10, I'll give you $100, and I gave you two options: next year or 20 years from now. Which one would you want? Next year. As soon as you get your money even faster, and that's what he wanted to. He wanted to get money back on his investment even faster. So he plants thousands of trees, plants them 2 to 3 feet apart, lets the cold kill most of them. In year 2 or 3, he cuts down the ones that aren't blooming. Now he's left with cold hardy trees that are also early blooming. All right, so go ahead and write down what Mark Shepard, what 2 traits he bred for, and maybe explain how he did that. So he selectively bred for 2 traits. What were they? And maybe add on how he did that. How would he do that? You can do that in probably just a sentence or so.